So going and seeing a family that was just intact and well and spiritually thriving was a big part of what brought me to the Lord. So
Welcome to the Simplified Organization Podcast, 15-minute conversations with real moms about managing our homes and family life cheerfully to the glory of God. We can actually enjoy housework and love being homemakers when we focus on truth and work with gratitude. I'm Mystie Winckler, homemaker, homeschool mom of 5 with 2 graduates, and author of the book Simplified Organization: Learn to Love What Must Be Done. Today, I have part 2 of my conversation with Tilly Dillehay about her new book, My Dear Hemlock, an excellent story that is basically screw tape letters for women. Tilly is a pastor's wife and homeschooling mother of 4 in the smallest county in Tennessee. She's also the author of Seeing Green and Broken Bread, plus the newly released My Dear Hemlock. She co-hosts the Home Fires podcast, and she keeps trying to get beets to come up in her garden. Last time we talked about how and why she was inspired to write this book, and we left off right where she was explaining that one particular chapter was autobiographical in how she came to the Lord. So let's jump back in with part 2.
but the letter about how she comes to the Lord is basically straight down the middle autobiography. So I was saved in a Christian home, being a guest with people who were counseling me when I was in the pits, basically. So I always remember that realization a few years after I'd come to the Lord, when I realized, like, yes, the counseling was a big part of it. There were specific truths that were being taught to me in those weeks, but it was in the context of a home that was overseen by a woman who was a godly woman, a warm presence, who just, the Lord was just with her, in what she was doing. And just seeing ordinary Christian life in a Christian home with a Christian family that was healthy. Because I was raised in a Christian home, but there was a big fallout and struggle that was happening around those years in my own family of origin. So going and seeing a family that was just intact and well and spiritually thriving was a big part of what brought me to the Lord. So
Sometimes I think when we're thinking about our own homemaking or even hospitality, we can think that it's about achieving some certain style or aesthetic or just making things
Mhm.
cozy. And so
Mhm.
thinking about it really being a part of spiritual warfare
Yes.
to efficacious kingdom
Yeah.
work
Mhm.
in ways that we don't see, I think
Yeah,
is super helpful.
absolutely. Eternal consequence.
So what kinds, especially since that was a part of, your testimony, particularly in your story, what makes up that healthy home? Like as we work on our own homemaking and we're trying to be faithful and diligent in our homes, what are the pieces we should all be?
Yeah, I think that dealing with your own sin, like a husband and a wife, I'm assuming a married household, that you're not a single woman who's doing this on her own. So a married couple with children running a household, I think that the handling of sin between the husband and the wife is basically the number one thing. Like how is your relationship with each other? And then how regularly are you washing your windows, basically? How regularly are you cleansing the air between you and keeping it sweet? Because that's the aroma of the home, really. I know that a woman can build a really lovely aroma around herself, even with an unbelieving husband. I think she can do that, and I've seen it done. But the most powerful and impactful version of this is when you have a husband and a wife who are both doing this together and are keeping short accounts with each other. I think a man who has kind of a mission and a wife who cares about that mission and is prioritizing that mission, I think that's the kind of forward motion that gives a home purpose and produces the kind of joy that we're all picturing when we think of this efficacious household that's dangerous to the enemy, that he doesn't want to spend time in. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of that stuff comes down to what I've just described, comes down to the personal, the development of self-control on the part of the husband and the wife, and just what that means for the kids and the experience that they have there. and the ability that whether you have the ability to bring other people into that home. I think it depends a lot on your own, just your self-discipline and your habits, like small habits.
Yeah, and it builds up over time.
Mhm,
And I know one thing that jumped out at me too was the basic habits of prayer and
mhm.
Bible
Yeah,
reading too, and going to church.
yeah. It's those private habits that it's you before the Lord, the husband doing what he ought to be doing in his spiritual life, and the wife doing what she ought to be doing, and experiencing the growth that you experience under those circumstances. Yeah, I know. I think even people who are really well-meaning, lovely Christian people, I think can still be very kind of frazzled and overwhelmed just by basic life things. I think I put myself in that category as just someone who's still really, really has to work so hard just to keep basic life going well. And I think that's why I reach first for just like basic personal discipline. Is such a big. It's impossible to get anything done without that. That's the problem. So
Yeah, it's not about the laundry systems first.
yeah, right. Yeah,
It's
I
about
guess I just.
afterwards.
Yeah.
And two, I loved at the beginning how there were multiple, it came up a few times, but then there were even two specific chapters on confession of sin. And so the demons are
Mhm.
like strategizing for how to prevent,
Right.
which then is just highlighting how confession and repentance truly does cleanse us
Mhm.
and gets rid of the gunk. So
Yes.
if these demons are trying to like add gunk buildup,
Mhm. That's
and
right.
just say, and with one confession, one repentance, one honest
Mhm.
repentance, and it's all gone.
Right. And they're like, "We don't know how this works, Hemlock. We just know that it will unlock the cages that we've built, around a human heart." Yeah, I mean, I just think it's such a huge, huge deal, and I don't know about you. I am the kind of person who is still surprised every time I have to clean a toilet or a shower. Like, every time I go in the shower to clean it, I'm like, "This is a place that's full of water and soap, and it's dirty. How is why? Like, why is this still happening?" And I just it's literally still a little bit of a surprise to me that, you're gonna have to do this every single week." And I think it's a lot of people are that way about confessing sin, that they just genuinely believe that if they are a certain kind of person, they're going to be able to get past the stage of ever having to apologize to their spouse, maybe. And I know that you can get to a point where there's just not a lot of offenses. I get that. I mean, I've seen that. But to really think that you have ever left behind the point in life when you might have to make something right with someone else is just such a bizarre position to take in this world. It'd be like a person who thinks that a shower should clean itself. And
I showered once.
yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah, right. Or yeah, person who doesn't wanna take a shower, which yeah, that's another story. But yeah, I think it should be just sort of part of your normal daily life, and it needs to be understood as part of normal life.
Yeah, I know when I was a younger homemaker and did not have very good home cleaning habits. I thought I was
Mhm,
gonna do the system, figure out a
mhm.
system that would mean I wouldn't actually have to work.
Have to do it. That's
Yes,
right, yeah.
that was my goal,
Yeah,
and it wasn't
that was
working.
good.
So I look around, I'm
Yeah,
like, "Well, it's not a sin." Like, you could say that, a dirty house is a sin,
yeah.
therefore, I don't really have a problem, or, just kind of
Mhm, mhm.
justifying or
Yeah,
excusing, and
yeah.
calling something a sin seemed like making it too big of a deal,
Mhm.
and it's like, "No." But
There's a name for this, it's called sloth.
yes, like, but is there resentment? But is there
Mhm,
bitterness? Is there
mhm.
sloth? Is there
Yeah,
bad attitude? Like, well, then sin. And cleaning
yeah.
that up might actually help these other things move forward.
Mm,
But when we do name the sin, identify and name our sin that is getting in our way, that means that we know what to do with it. We confess it, and it's, you know, Jesus forgives it. It's gone, it's cleansed. And
Mhm.
so instead of feeling like, there's a sense I think of being afraid of feeling guilty or not wanting to feel guilty, so avoiding
Mhm. Mhm.
naming sin.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, I feel like I've had people that I knew really well, and I really think there was just a fear of if I ever say that I've done this thing that's truly wrong, like an actual sin, it would even be comfortable saying I've made a mistake or I didn't mean to say that thing or, there's just there's a person who I think doesn't understand grace enough to believe that they could be truly covered and cleansed and forgiven and perfected eventually if they're actually sinning right now. And it's a sad place to live because it means you can never totally face the reality, which is that you are sinning. You're sinning every day and it's okay. And it's only okay because of, someone in Jesus Christ who you say that you believe in. So you need to embrace this stuff. Like this is basic gospel.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, our stories are a testimony to God's
mhm,
grace, not to
exactly.
our perfection.
Right.
The
Yeah.
story the story requires us to acknowledge our sin,
Mhm. Yeah.
not to pretend it doesn't exist.
Right, and I even get sometimes kinda irritated with just, like, Christian writing sometimes. I don't think I've ever talked about this with anybody, but just sometimes the examples that you read in a Christian book of, like, the way that the author messed up, you're just kind of like, "Really?" Like, you thought about almost saying the thing that just every once in a while, you just think, "Is this really?" It's not like I want you to air all your dirty laundry. I don't like when we confess sin that is so mild that it makes any real confession of sin almost impossible for anyone else that we're talking to. I'm not a fan, but I get that you gotta take care with these things. I think the Envy book was the kind of book that I felt like I had to apologize for sometimes, like how ugly all the stuff in that book was, but it was true, it was real, so, it's a balance. It's a hard line to walk, and it's hard for a writer, but it's also hard just for a woman who's in a way that's edifying for other people and not, gross and I don't know, what's the word? Just careless, I guess.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I know it's so common, I think, particularly in circles of women, whether
Mhm,
that's real life or especially online,
mhm.
to, only put that best foot forward.
Yeah.
Everything's perfect outer crust, and we're not
Mhm,
going to talk about anything else or ever admit to anything else. And then, so it's easy to then feel like, oh, I'm the only one who's struggling. Everyone else is put together and has figured this
mhm.
out. And I'm the only one struggling.
Yeah,
To not know where to go with that is
yeah.
very,
Right. I know. And I think, yeah, probably part of this, I should do more thinking about this, but part of the issue probably is just that we're trying to do our confession in groups. Like we're in a group of like Bible study ladies, and either we choose that as the moment where we're going to just blah everything out, when we haven't even like confessed it to our husband, or we are going to use that group time to kind of keep the facade up. And I do think if you're dealing with sin with one other person, like, an older woman who's mentor or with your spouse or with the person you sinned against, obviously, if you're dealing with sin well in those contexts, I do think that urge to just like word vomit all of your sin in a group is not you're just more, I guess you're more adjusted in your cleansed state. And so you don't have to keep regurgitating it. And also but at the same time, like, you're able to talk about it maybe in a natural way that is edifying in those groups because you're secure in the fact that, yes, you are a sinner, and yes, you have been
right after it's processed and forgiven and
right.
dealt with. That
Yeah.
can become
And
something
it's
that's
like, okay,
edifying for others.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but not the group therapy model.
That's right. Yeah. Exactly.
Was there like your favorite point that you'd like to share, to highlight? from this book?
That's a good question. That's a tough question, though. I think the thing that's probably going to linger for me in the work of this book was, well, I do think it's lingering for me, the idea on a daily basis, being aware of what a demon would want in the moment that I'm in. So I do think there's been a little more awareness in my day-to-day life of like, oh, that seems like the kind of thing, that they would want me to say and do. I should not do that thing. But yeah, I think the picture of the maturing saint who has grown to love her life and just be so happy to be alive and so grateful that she gets to be in her space, whatever, in her home, in her family, in her marriage, in her church, and has just recognized her place. That thing that happens in a maturing Christian woman who's adjusted to age and to, she's not young and immature and insecure, she's secure in herself, but she's secure in the Lord, and she's secure in finally having understood how blessed she is in him. I think that's the picture that I kind of am carrying with me of like that's the goal line. That's the sight line that I have. And yeah, I think if I want anything for the women who are reading this book, I think that's what I want for them, is that.
Yeah, that perspective of seeing too that whole story. Like, oh, that's right. It's not just today. It's not just this week, a lifetime. God is working in me over a lifetime. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and for working on this book and getting it out there. It was an enjoyable read. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Glad. So glad. And thank you for having me on. It's been fun.
I highly recommend that you pick up a copy of Tilly's excellent new book, My Dear Hemlock. There's a link in the episode description below. And if you need more gratitude and joy in your approach to life, then try taking my Joy Reset Masterclass. You can find that at simplyconvivial.com/joy and use the code TILLY for 30% off. The masterclass comes with 3 video workshops, each with an accompanying worksheet. Find it at simplyconvivial.com/joy so you can get some traction, repenting, rejoicing, and repeating.